Welcome to Radio KAL, the Superman podcast brought to you by supermanhomepage.com. This is show number 143, released on November 30th, 2016, proudly sponsored by our good friend Patrick O'Neill. My name is Steve Eunice, and I'm joined by my good friend Scotty V. Hey, Scotty.
Hello, Steve. Hello, everyone listening. How's it going?
Yeah, going well. It's approaching the end of 2016. We've got here we are at the end of November, and 1 month to go. And where has the year gone?
It's been very quick. I mean, the time, every time I turn around, I'm older, my kids are bigger, life seems to be passing me by.
A little bit like that, doesn't it feel like that? Yes, I can relate. Definitely, just flies by, and just where has the year gone? Where is life going? But anyway, that's not the subject that we're here to talk about. We're here to talk about the fun stuff that's been happening in the world of Superman. And as we like to do, we'd like to start with movie news. And there hasn't been a lot this past month. A few tidbits here and there, not much to really sink our teeth into. But I guess the main one for the upcoming Justice League movie was the fact that there was a report that Ciaran Hinds has been cast in the role of Steppenwolf for the Justice League movie. Now, we don't know if that's a live-action role, if that's a motion capture role, but we did see Steppenwolf in a deleted scene or extended scene for Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice, and that was a completely CGI character. So, an interesting bit of news there for casting.
Well, it is interesting. I'm a big fan of Game of Thrones. I don't really know him from anything else, so I definitely I've seen his capabilities as an actor, but the interesting thing is, I guess he's going to be motion capture and just voicing Steppenwolf, because from what I've heard, he's not actually going to appear in the movie as a man. So
it's strange. I mean, whether it's a live action one or, as I said, CGI, maybe it is just his voice, because he does seem to have a very unique type of voice, and that's, very distinctive.
Right. Well, the other interesting thing is that they were saying that the character of Steppenwolf is going to look differently from the way he appeared in the deleted scene from Batman v Superman, which I guess for most theater goers that'll be fine because they didn't get to see that. But why do you think they would change up his look?
Well, maybe the way he appeared in Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice was more of a, he seemed to disappear in the way that the Kryptonian technology for visualizations and those kinds of things appear. Like he disintegrated and he seemed like all metallic, similar to the way that all the Jor-El stuff that he showed KAL in Man of Steel, using all that. I don't know what you call filaments or whatever they call. So maybe that was just a representation of Steppenwolf using that technology rather than the actual Steppenwolf in person himself.
All right, that's an explanation that I can get behind. We'll see if they go into explaining it, or maybe we'll just be expected to see that this is his real life representation as opposed to whatever it was we saw in the Fortress. For those of us who actually did see it.
Yeah, exactly. Now, the only other bit of news there is for a possible follow-up to Man of Steel was a further confirmation from Amy Adams, who has gotten on the back of what we heard previously from Henry Cavill's manager, who said that there is a film in active development and that's kind of all planned out and mapped out, or even though there isn't a script in that. And Amy Adams confirms that, yes, she's heard the same things. No, she hasn't seen the script. It's still early days, but she has heard that that's happening, and so I guess just another bit of confirmation from someone in the know.
Well, 2 episodes ago on Great Scott, I kind of covered the idea that Man of Steel 2 was happening, while at the same time acknowledging that nobody official has come out and said that it is. And by official, I mean someone writing a script, the people at Warner Brothers, the people who actually make the movie. Amy Adams is official in terms of she's involved in this movie universe, but I don't know how much she actually can be relied upon to know, not that she's lying, but that that it's actually happening, as opposed to her just saying, oh, yes, since 2012 or whatever, I have heard whisperings that there would be a sequel, as opposed to knowing that something is actively going on. And at the same time, we've had Henry Cavill's agent, I guess, confirm that that's the next thing he's going to be going into working on, which, again, is nice to hear, but with no actual official confirmation, it seems odd that either of these people would say things of that nature.
Yeah, I mean, there's not Zack Snyder, or it's not a producer or somebody saying it's in the works. It's just hearsay at this moment from people beyond just fans. So I guess it gives us something to latch onto. But as you say, nothing really that we can sink our teeth into, because there's nothing official. It's not a confirmation as far as any official capacity. It's just someone a bit more above the level of, reporters from newspapers or media sites or fan sites who's actually possibly hearing something that is more connected than those that I've just mentioned.
Right. And again, it is exciting. It's nice to hear, because you would think that these two people would have some inside knowledge of what was being done that maybe hasn't been yet released, because the agent needs to know, because he's signing the contracts and making the deals. And Amy Adams, assumedly, will play Lois Lane in the movie, so she would have maybe an earlier insider's knowledge than what has yet been released. The other thing that you have to be concerned about as Superman fans, and as people who maybe enjoyed the Man of Steel movie, or even those who didn't but maybe want to see a sequel go in a different direction, the thing you need to be concerned about, at least from my standpoint, from what it seems, is it's always one of those things where every minute we're being told by somebody, whether it's official or not, how disappointing the returns were, how both Man of Steel and Batman v Superman underperformed, and how they know that Batman's bankable, so we're getting a trilogy with Ben Affleck writing for Batman, but still no word, still no movement, still nothing happening. And the only thing we've heard about Justice League in terms of Superman is that he will have a very minor role, barely appear, and show up toward the end.
Oh, well, again, we haven't heard anything in any official capacity along those lines. That's just hearsay about what's happening with the Justice League movie, because we really don't know anything from anybody official about how much involved Superman is.
And I thought the writers came out and said he's going to have a big, important role, but that he won't appear until the final third of the movie.
I think we heard something along those lines, but again, it's similar to what Amy Adams has said. We haven't heard from the writer himself that I can remember, because I don't remember hearing any interviews with... Who is it? Is it Chris Terrio who's writing the script for Justice League, or wrote the script?
I'm not certain. I just thought that's where that report came from, the writers. I didn't know who else that would be that said that, unless that was another one of the websites you mentioned that just comes out with things, and who knows what to take from that.
Yep. Well, we'll have to wait and see just what does happen. It is a year away. We are in November as we're releasing this, and that is a yearly mark. November 2017 is the year that Justice League will come out. So we're still a year away, but it's closer than ever before.
Well, I mean, we had this discussion with Batman v Superman and with Man of Steel. The time. Again, you started the podcast by talking about how time flies, and this is another situation where with both of those movies, and it seems every time we're waiting for something, we talk about it for a year, 2 years. It seems so far away, and yet both of those movies have come and gone, and even Batman v Superman seems like extremely old news at this point, even though it still only came out this year.
Yeah.
But time is going by, and the year will come seemingly sooner than you would think it would, because again, it seems I remember this almost exact situation with both Man of Steel and Batman v Superman, where everyone was anxious and everybody was waiting, and we kept saying it's so long, it's still a year away, I'm sure there's going to be a lot more developing between then and now, but it's going to get here, and we're going to be, before you know it, talking about what we thought of it.
Yep, exactly. All right, well, the only other bit of Superman news or Superman-related movie news is a sad report that actor Robert Vaughn passed away. He was, for Superman fans, best known as Ross Webster in the movie Superman 3, the villain who was a bit more like the Lex Luthor we know if you're more of a modern day comic book fan. But to fans worldwide, he was probably better known as in the role for the Man from U.N.C.L.E., which was recently played by Henry Cavill. In a bit of a coincidence there.
It all comes back to Superman.
It does. So he passed away recently, and it will be fondly remembered for the great career that he did have.
Yes, absolutely. As much as the movie Superman 3 can be maligned, and as much as I personally enjoy bits of it, it really hasn't gone down in history as a great Superman movie. But as you say, he played kind of and I think it was one of the shortcomings of the original casting and the kind of the original way they decided to go with Lex Luthor, because when they did get to Superman 3, they couldn't then say this guy was Lex Luthor, but they were in that kind of age where video games and computers and the idea of that type of entertainment was kind of on the cusp of happening, and so it was a hot topic to have a guy who had this kind of digital technology and created this robotic machinery and had the whole Atari game with Superman flying and avoiding missiles, and you had Robert Vaughn saying, let's see how long he can get along without any air, and I think that was the woman who said that, but putting him in a bubble, and it was one of those points where I always thought, well, if it's that easy, you think just every villain would just put him in a vacuum and easily defeat Superman if he's going to suffocate and fairly quickly. But he was and again, it was an over the top movie. The movie itself was much more comedic than the other incarnations in the series, and Robert Vaughn was no different in that film. He was kind of over the top, but he was this businessman who had lots of money and who had controlling interests in oil and things of that nature, which is much more like, as you say, the Lex Luthor that we're used to. So it was an interesting portrayal in a very, very interesting film, but definitely remembered for that role. For me, I don't know that I have ever seen him in anything else. I know he was in Man from U.N.C.L.E., and that, of course, is his, I guess, most well-known role. Mm-hmm. But Superman 3, one of those things we'll all have to remember, regardless of whether we liked it or not. And he was one of the good points, I think.
Yeah, he passed away earlier in November at the age of 83 after a brief battle with acute leukemia, and leaves behind his wife, Linda, son Cassidy, and daughter Caitlin, who we pass on our condolences to. So sad news there. Robert Vaughn, rest in peace. All right, now let's move into some TV news where we had a fantastic announcement, that I think a lot of fans didn't see coming and were hoping for. I remember we ran it as a April Fool's Day joke a couple of years back. That's how much people wanted it. But it is how it's happening. It's official. Young Justice is coming back for a third season after being cancelled by Cartoon Network a couple of years back. Young Justice coming back to Cartoon Network for a third season. Everyone who was involved is coming back, and it finished in 2013, but will be back, I believe, in sometime in 2017.
This is fantastic news. Great animated show. I talked about it many, many times. I think it had the greatest depth. I think it had the greatest sense of seriousness, even though it was a cartoon. And I think that it had a lot of interweaving plot lines, and just they set up mysteries weeks in advance that they got to later. Things that I think even the TV side of the live-action universe, which is chugging along really strongly and people are loving, I think still fails on a lot of levels in terms of really good writing and planting seeds and having those seeds grow into fruition. Something that Young Justice did really, really well. And I actually think it's probably why it didn't last long enough on Cartoon Network, because as we see with Justice League Action that's just been released, it's really a network that's for the ADD generation, the idea that we only have a very short attention span. We want to watch really quick snippets. We want them to be a little goofy and really kind of silly, and we don't want to have to think about them too much. And I think Young Justice required a little more attention than that. I think it required you to yeah, it was more mature. It required you to pay attention to things and follow dialogue and things that the YouTube generation is not really used to doing. You know, you're watching these goofy videos of people being crazy. The Vine generation, and of course, Vine, the app just shut down and it's gone forever, I guess, not that long ago. But the idea that people just want to watch quick, even Twitter, 144 characters. We want little, quick, quippy jokes or things like that. We can't get too involved with, especially a cartoon that has these deep plots and is really, it has a lot of depth to it and depth of character and mysteries that play out over 10 episodes. And so it's great to see that, something like Netflix, which I'm super pleased with the things I've been watching on Netflix. I think they do a great job, and I think it's a great platform.
Yeah, well, Young Justice is coming back for a third season. President of Warner Brothers Animation, Sam Register, said, "We are excited to bring the show back for this loyal fan base and provide an opportunity for new viewers to discover this excellent series." As I said, producers Brandon Vietti and Greg Weisman are back. They're the creators of the series. They're both returning. But no other further details have been released at this point in time. Actually, we don't know if it will be on Cartoon Network or which network it will be on. We don't yet know a premiere date, but we have a tentative website at yjs3.com, which you can check out, and I think you can register there, and I'll send you further details in your email to update you on updates as they happen. So, Young Justice season 3 in production.
Well, for some reason I was under the impression it was going to be on Netflix. That's why I went on about Netflix. But that was my reasoning for going into that. And I remember, I don't know if it was the April Fool's joke that was run, that we had initially tried to pretend it was going to be coming back on Netflix, or if it's just the idea that we've been saying for so long, not you necessarily, but fans and things, that Netflix would be a great place for it.
Yeah, I think that's where
it doesn't really matter where, as long as they put in the time and they're willing to, have it, last, as opposed
stick to it.
Bringing it back and then saying, well, we didn't get the, I don't know, we don't have the quick fix generation watching, so we got to get rid of it. I don't know, but it hasn't. I'm kind of happy it hasn't been announced for Cartoon Network, but I guess I figure that's probably where it's going to be, being that I'm wrong now that it's not Netflix.
Well, it could be Netflix. Well, let's have wait and see what happens, because the Cartoon Network, as you say, didn't do it any justice back when it was on, so it didn't really help us out that it kept jumping around here, there, and everywhere. So we'll have to wait and see. But as you did mention, Justice League Action did premiere in the US. It's an 11-minute episode. I think they do 2 back-to-back, or maybe that's just in the UK. The UK has already premiered the first episode, Saturday, November 26th, and there'll be other episodes airing on a weekly basis. The US premiere will be on Friday, December 16th. It will be a 4-part special event titled Shazam Slam, with new episodes then airing on Saturday mornings starting December 24th on Cartoon Network. And there have been a few clips released online. As I said, they're 11-minute episodes, so it's like a 15-minute block. And they do, I believe, put them 2 episodes back-to-back for a half-hour block or 25-minute block. So check that out on Cartoon Network in the US, Friday, December 16th. The premiere will take place.
Have you had the release in Australia?
Not as yet. I've been looking for it. It may not be until January here, because I believe some other countries, Belgium and some other ones, are also getting a January release. So I've kept an eye on the schedule here for TV programming, but I have not seen Justice League Action scheduled yet. And they usually do about a 2-week schedule that you can check out. So I haven't seen it for the first couple of weeks of December yet. So it may not be till early January for us.
So what about online or digitally? Is it available to people, or do they have to wait until it premieres? Can you see, aside from clips, are these going to be available to watch streaming or online anywhere?
Good question. I don't know if Cartoon Network will release them, seeing as how they're short clips. I know that DC Comics released all those what were they the shorts that they had for DC Nation. They were all eventually released online, but you'll probably find if you go to the Cartoon Network website that the episodes may be able to be streamed there, not live necessarily, but I guess that would probably still be regional based, meaning that if you're not in the US, then just like with the CW app or anything like that, you won't be able to watch episodes unless you're from the US necessarily. So, good question, but we'll have to wait and see.
All right. If anybody in the UK has access to the UK-based website, now that the shows have aired, and you want to let us know if they're then able to watch after they've been aired, or if there's a place for you guys to watch them, that'd be good to know, because then we might be able to infer that once they release in other countries, they would then also be available, but we'll have to see.
Yep, exactly. All right, well, let's move on to talk about Supergirl. And there have been, 4 episodes as we're recording this podcast that have aired since our last podcast, and the first one of those was Survivors, episode 4 of season 2, and in this one it's the Fight Club, I guess, if you want to call it that. Roulette, the ringmaster who commands aliens to fight in Mortal Kombat for the entertainment of rich humans. They're obviously involved Martian Manhunter, Supergirl, and McGahn was heavily involved in this episode too.
Absolutely. It was. I don't remember if that was the one where he went to her, or if it happened in the episode before that. But I was very emotionally affected by him discovering that there was another Martian still alive, and I thought it was very touching and very dramatic. And then, of course, once we get into the episode, and it's a kind of a repeated and oft-seen plot that they use on these superhero shows, a fight club where superpowered beings are made to fight against each other for betting and entertainment purposes. And, of course, we have the always present ringmaster woman who is this person who only cares about the money and says there's no rules protecting them, so she can keep doing it. And no matter how many times you try to interfere, Supergirl, you're not going to be able to stop me. That kind of thing seems to, again, be another oft-repeated thing that seems to happen in these episodes. But it was interesting that the bout was meant to be between the two Martians. And, of course, we see Megan unwilling to follow through with the killing, which is what they wanted from her.
Yeah, exactly. And it was not one of the greatest episodes. It didn't have a lot of character development. We did see a bit of development for Mon-El, and the fact that Kara was trying to take him under her wing and trying to bring him into like the superhero light, if you want, to try to get him to follow in her footsteps, so to speak, because she never got to bring up KAL and help him because he wasn't a baby when she arrived here. He'd already become Superman, and so she feels almost like this is her chance to, perform the duty that she was sent to Earth to do in the first place by her parents, and she can do that with Mon-El. But obviously the difference in personality, the difference in age, the difference in their upbringing has caused a bit of problems for the two since that had kind of came to fruition.
Yeah, well, we've seen through the next few episodes the relationship develop, and the idea that Mon-El wants to kind of be more of a partier. He's interested in the women, as we saw with Eve Tessmacher, which, of course, is a little call out to fans, I guess. She's very unlike Miss Tessmacher from the Superman movies. So from what I can tell, it's really just a matter of using the name so that it's there. But that was an incredibly kind of sexy scene where Kara, I don't know what episode it was in, but where she overheard the amorousness happening and went in and kind of broke in on them in a state of undress. But on the other hand, as far back as Lois and Clark back in the 90s, they were in various states of undress many, many times, and were said to have had sexual relations and been in bed together, and it was a romance, so it happened almost every episode with somebody.
Well, even as far back as Superman 2.
Well, yes, and that, of course, is a movie, and that was I think that was rated PG, and I think maybe today it would be PG-13. I don't know if PG-13 was
around back then
in existence yet. I think that was 81 that Superman 2 came out?
Yes.
And I think PG-13 was a rating that was introduced for Temple of Doom, which was 83, and they actually created that rating for Temple of Doom because Steven Spielberg refused to accept an R rating, so they actually had to create a whole new rating system. But I think today maybe that before that scene, Superman 2 may have been rated PG-13, but we have here a show that the reason I bring it up is because I have recently seen a post where several people have, and I don't know them, but I've seen comments akin to people saying, I used to be able to watch this with my children, but now I can't. And it reminds me of Man of Steel or of Batman v Superman. The one thing that I am disappointed in with those films, and to make me happy, they may not be able to fix this problem. So maybe I'm being hypocritical, and that is that I don't know that I feel incredibly comfortable with introducing to children to Superman through these movies because they're very dark and they're very
violent,
depressing, and then there's a lot of violence, and there is the snapping of the neck, which has been a great source of humor for all the critics, but so it's not the family friendly, homegrown kind of girl next door feeling that we get from Supergirl, which now, as I said, with some of these more grown-up plot lines, Alex discovering her own sexuality, Mon-El undressing Eve Tessmacher in front of everyone in the office, these kinds of things maybe are turning off some families from being comfortable. But on the other hand, I felt the same way about Smallville when I watched it, and I didn't have young children at that point that I was watching the show with, but my feeling there was, is this really what we want to be showing ninth grade high schoolers doing? I mean, as early as the first season, the students in the Cold episode were talking about how they were showering together and then sneaking into the shower with each other, and it was a very kind of adult, mature subject matter on a show on the CW, which was the CW at the time, or was the WB at the time, but which has always been marketed toward a younger audience. So I don't think it's a new thing with Supergirl, but I do think it's happened recently on this show, which has been fairly innocuous in terms of showing sexuality before now.
No, I agree with you. It has escalated somewhat in season 2. The episode that you were referring to with Mon-El and Miss Tessmacher was Crossfire, which was the next episode, and that involved a ruthless new gang being armed with dangerous new alien technology, weapons that were given to them by Cadmus, and Cadmus is fairly open with the DEO, sending them a video saying, yes, we are behind we're the ones behind these weapons being given to these criminal elements. And that's the episode that Mon-El gets a job as an intern at Catco, and things go awry, as you mentioned. And it's also an episode where James makes an important decision about what he wants to start doing with his life. And Lena invited Kara to a fundraiser there as well at Luthor Corp, or L Corp, or whatever she's calling it these days. But it was, I guess, a seminal episode where things started moving forward for certain characters.
Yeah, and this is where the first in a series of issues that I have with the James Olsen character started to come to fruition. And my biggest issue is James has never been trained. Arrow, which is this kind of is in the same sort of vein as, where he decides he wants to become a vigilante, which hasn't yet happened yet, but in the episode, but he did not have 5 years on an island. He was not trained by Russian mob types. He did not, learn how to survive by being alone on an island and trying to be assassinated every week. This is James Olsen, who grew up idolizing Superman, and they have mentioned once or twice that he is a black belt. It just kind of came out of nowhere. It was never mentioned before. We never saw him in any fighting of any kind. And then because they knew where they wanted to go with it, they suddenly mentioned that he's a black belt. But in this very episode, a couple of thugs with guns easily take him out. They don't use the advanced weaponry to do it either. They're just some thugs, and they're clearly not trained in any sort of fighting either. And they easily take him out, and he can't get to the weapon on the ground, and the van drives away, and he's laying there, and then he decides he wants to be a vigilante. Well, a guy who can't even defend himself and jumps to action but fails. And then only a couple of weeks later, we see where we're at. And so this was the beginning to me of just an overuse of the James Olsen character as this super fighting ninja guy, where we've never seen him do anything like that before. And the one time we see him try, he fails miserably.
Yeah, and I guess the problem with James in this particular season and early on was the fact that the relationship between he and Kara was cut off and kind of put to the side. And other than him becoming the head honcho at Catco, taking over Cat Grant's role, there really wasn't a role for him in the series. He seemed to have been kind of like lost to the main character roster. But I guess they developed a story for him that made him more prevalent and more of an interesting character to some people by creating the Guardian persona, and that's where he's decided to go. In the next episode titled Changing, which is episode 6 of season 2, he debuts as Guardian, and he decides to lend a hand to Supergirl after the introduction of Parasite. In this version of the TV series, we see this very interesting introduction to the series, to this episode, where it's in a remote location. There's it's almost like an episode of the X-Files, or particular horror movies where you got a crew in a remote area, an ice area, where there's an alien parasite that is found within the carcass of an animal, and they go forward from there, and it becomes the Parasite, which was an interesting take on the origins of the Parasite character.
Yeah, I actually really enjoyed the take on the Parasite here. I thought it was a nice way to present it, even though we didn't really receive an explanation as to what this alien being was or where it came from. It was interesting that this was already a parasitic organism that was apparently alien in nature, and then it bonded with Rudy Jones. I liked that they used his name. Yes. I liked it, even though they kind of changed the character into this environmental scientist type, which he's never really been before. But I like that they used his name, and I like that they kind of have a symbiotic relationship, which is what it was in the comics and what it's been in other incarnations, such as the animated series. And then what we haven't seen before is the excuse as to why they mutated into the Parasite, the purple, giant, muscular, energy-sucking being that we all know as that character. And the quick one-off excuse they gave was that it was because he siphoned from Supergirl and Martian Manhunter at the same time, and that must have been what caused it to happen. Now, since we don't have any actual scientific experience in this matter, and since that part of the show is completely fictitious and made up, none of us can really argue that that wouldn't happen. So that's their explanation, and that's what they're sticking to.
Exactly, and it's pseudoscience, I guess, and that's what you have to put your disbelief aside for these types of shows, is that kind of stuff can happen and does happen, and you don't try to explain it too much. We also saw Mon-El going down a bit of a darker path, becoming a bit of a thug for money, debt collector, if you like. And we also saw Alex, as you say, struggling with her new reality and trying to decide what's happening with her. So the title of Changing for the episode was not just for the parasite and the changes that happened with Rudy Jones, as you mentioned, but also the changes that Mon-El was going through and the changes that Alex is experiencing as well in her life.
Well, that's a very apt title, and there's a lot of changing going on with a lot of the characters. I continue my James Olsen issue here, and the problem is, and I've had many people mention to me that it seems to them that Jimmy Olsen could take everybody and that he's the most powerful of them all. And, of course, part of that is joking, but part of that is also a little bit apt. And the problem is when you, like you said, maybe it's because they ran out of storyline or whatever, but when you show that Mon-El, Supergirl are both thrown aside with ease by this parasite because he's so strong, and then you see James Olsen, who has no training, as I mentioned before, save the magical black belt that he suddenly has, and yet some thugs on the street were able to take him out very easily. It's very hard to swallow, and I know you just mentioned suspension of disbelief, but the show itself just showed him as an inept street fighter in the very last episode, and now suddenly he runs up after both Mon-El and Supergirl are knocked aside with ease, and this larger-than-Hulk character is first of all, he hits the shield. Okay, there's an electric charge on the shield that knocks the parasite back. That was purposely put there by Wynn. Great job, Wynn. But then Jimmy Olsen gets into a hand-to-hand combat situation where he's ducking punches and able to stand up to him until the DEO people come and start shooting at the parasite, and then he leaps away. But it's very hard to swallow when we've had no development of James. He just sort of became this with no training and no ability, and the show itself is contradicting the ability that he suddenly magically has one episode earlier, showing us that he can't even stand up to a high school age thug. And now he's fighting this giant, super strong creature that has knocked both Mon-El and Supergirl aside, and Martian Manhunter, with ease every time.
Yeah, it is a bit of a stretch, and I guess I'll attribute some of that assistance to Wynn and his suit and his the abilities he's maybe engendered into the suit. But yeah, it's a stretch. Jimmy's not, other than being a black belt, he's had no training or hasn't excelled or increased his abilities since that time, as you say, that the thugs knocked him down. And the only thing I can suggest or include there is that he's more prepared this time and actually was ready for it and went into action rather than being caught on the spot at the time of the thugs that they attacked. But
I just think they took it too far, because I'm okay with him running out in stupidity and / bravery and throwing up the shield, which knocks the parasite back. But probably at that point is when the DEO and everybody should have shown up, and they should have all controlled him together, as opposed to showing Jimmy in this fighting position with the parasite for several seconds or minutes before it all happened, because he doesn't actually hit him, and yet several super powered, speedy, super fast characters weren't able to avoid the same blows that Jimmy seems to be easily dodging. The other thing I wanted to mention was that I think this is another place where Supergirl is wrong. And the last time she apologized for being quote-unquote racist toward Mon-El for being a Daxamite and her preconceived notions of what a Daxamite is, and that Mon-El is the same, and she immediately hated him upon finding out that he was a Daxamite. But in this case, other than the idea that it might be an illegal job, if it even is, she is placing her own belief system on somebody else. And it's kind of like a really over-ambitious parent who expects their child to follow in their footsteps, and when they don't, condemning them and yelling at them and berating them. I don't care one way or another about who Mon-El is or what the deal is, but from a super family member perspective, it's very wrong, I think, to berate someone for not doing what it is you think they should be doing. Now, if he's being criminal or if he's doing something illegal as Supergirl, she might come and say, I can't allow you to keep doing that. But that's not what she's doing. She's saying, you're supposed to be a hero. You're supposed to do good things. You're supposed to do what I want you to do, and I'm disappointed. I guess it's okay to be disappointed, but I think that Kara was completely wrong in this entire episode, the way she talked to Mon-El and her expectations of Mon-El. And, of course, he steps up at the end, so she's kind of proven to be right in that she had a strong belief in him. But then even Alex goes in and berates him in the bar. It says, I don't care about you, Mon-El, but it's Kara who believes in you. Who's to say that he wasn't meant to be a garbage man? Who's to, going back to the parents and son or analogy or whatever, who's to say that just because you became a brain surgeon that I'm not meant to be a street sweeper, and that's not what I'm supposed to be? So I felt that that was a missed opportunity for her to once again have some character growth herself in realizing that she once again has gone to a prejudging standpoint and once again has placed maybe unrealistic feelings and goals upon somebody who might not have them and has every right to not have them. He doesn't have to be what Supergirl became just because she wants him to be, and he hasn't expressed any interest in being such. So why is it right for her to force him down that path when it's not something that he seems to have any interest in doing?
Yeah, no, good point. And it did seem a bit preachy from her and a bit judgmental. So it was a missed opportunity, as you say, to not bring her to an understanding that, hey, I've got to let him do what he wants, whether I think it's right or wrong. Maybe punching people for money or being a debt collector in that way is not the best use of his time, but there was a missed opportunity, as you say. So that's disappointing.
Yeah, and if that's illegal or if that's something he shouldn't do, she may say, well, I can't stand by and watch you do it. Yeah. And if I look the other way and something criminal happens, then we're going to be against each other. But as far as from a judgmental standpoint, in terms of that you should be a hero and you should use your powers like I do, that's what I'm referring to, and I think they let that go because in the end he does come out and he does sacrifice himself and he is heroic.
Yeah.
And so now it's not going to be brought up again because
he's changed
doing what she wanted him to do.
Yeah.
But that's kind of like, well, it's okay as long as you're doing what I want, so everything's fine now.
Indeed. All right, and the most recent episode was The Darkest Place. Now, we are launching this podcast in the week that the episode Medusa was released, and that's part of the first part of a 3-part crossover, or 4-show crossover, if you want to call it that, which we'll get to in a second. But The Darkest Place found James Olsen trying to clear his name as the Guardian because he's being accused of being a murderer after another vigilante committed murder and attributed it to the Guardian, and everyone thought it was the Guardian. But Supergirl also heads out on a solo mission to rescue Mon-El, who's been captured by Cadmus. And this was a very explosive episode in the fact that we'd learnt that Hank Henshaw the real Hank Henshaw was not dead and was calling himself Cyborg Superman after being a bit of is a cyborg himself. And Jeremiah Danvers is still alive, or is he, easily rescuing Supergirl and Mon-El at the end of the episode.
Yeah, I actually really liked this episode. I liked a lot of what happened. I think we were meant to. I think it was a lot of reveals in this episode, as you say, with Jeremiah and with Cyborg Superman. And I was kind of hoping Jeremiah would be Cyborg Superman, but on the other hand, that would be very disheartening and sad. So it's kind of good that he wasn't, although I thought that the fan connections would have been much greater since he played Superman, Dean Cain, and since Cyborg Superman was originally a clone, supposed to be a clone or a new existence of Superman after he had died in the comics, which is where Cyborg Superman first came from. And my problem with this version of Hank Henshaw, whom he was in the comics, being Cyborg Superman in this show and in this story is that he has no likeness to Superman. He has no connection to Superman, and there is no reason for him to suddenly just spout out, "I'm Cyborg Superman." It was a bit badly written. It was a bit clunky. It was a bit like no one ever, it happens in these shows all the time, but in general, no one ever walks into a room and says, "I'm Scott Vinicombe. How is everyone?" Or, no one ever introduces themselves when they're in a battle or when they're having an argument, or finds the need to say, "Well, my nickname's John," just out of nowhere. So I felt they wanted to say it because, ooh, Cyborg Superman, but I don't see any reason why this rendition of this character would ever have called himself that. And maybe we'll find out as time goes on, but I certainly don't see any reason why he felt it necessary to say it right then.
I agree. I thought that was the one part of the episode that felt clunky, as you say. It just didn't ring true. It just didn't make sense for himself to call, Cyborg Hank maybe, or Hank Cyborg or whatever. But the fact that he called himself Cyborg Superman was a bit weird, and it just came out of left field and didn't seem true to the character. But it was interesting to see Hank's still alive and that he's a cyborg, and maybe the injuries that he, that were threatening his life back on that episode where we saw Martian Manhunter take over his life. That Cadmus was able to save him and needed to obviously create a cyborg to do so. But Jeremiah being there and being able to save them at the end seemed too easy. And I was wondering if that's a shapeshifter, if that is really the real Jeremiah, or if how does he just have the run of the place?
Yeah, it is a little interesting, and you do have to wonder, unless somehow they're forcing him to work for them, and he hasn't been put in any programs or anything, and he just heard about this situation and somehow snuck away and got them out. But the other thing that makes it seem a little bit suspicious is that he stays there at the end when he could have easily went with them. So this is either bad writing, where there's no, at the end of X2, where Jean Grey just says, no, you all go, I'm going to get killed here. When she could have held back the water, got on the ship with them, and they all could have left. In this case, Jeremiah could have left with them. I guess the excuse was, I need to stay here and hold them off because neither of you have powers and you have to limp out of here. But it seemed to me that it was a little bit unnecessary for him to stay and quote-unquote sacrifice himself so that they could get away, because when he first got them out of there, no one was on their tail and they all could have left together. So that makes it either a little suspicious or a little badly written. We'll have to find out if there's some reason he needs to stay there, or if he really isn't him, as you say. It did not occur to me that maybe he was some sort of an imposter, but that is certainly possible. I just found it a little bit weird that it went down the way it went down, and I found myself a little confused as to why he said, "I'm not going with you, I'm going to stay here." So, yes, you're right, and I feel the same way. It was a little bit odd and seemed unusual that is the way it would have went down. I did like the way they introduced the lead poisoning that Mon-El has. I thought it was cool. I was wondering when they introduced the character if they would have thought that was a little too silly, or if there was no way that they could, this guy's allergic to lead and that makes him weak. So it was neat that they did it with a bullet. Obviously, we're all allergic to bullets, but he has the same sort of imperviousness to bullets generally. So the fact that he doesn't, and we know that now, is pretty bad for him if people are going to shoot at him with bullets. Now, with the fact that he has super speed and that most incarnations of Mon-El can fly, even though we haven't seen that happen here, he should be able to avoid bullet fire because he should be faster, like Superman is, than bullets. But maybe he isn't. We'll have to see where that goes. And the other thing is that I like that they called back the solar flare, but I thought it was misused because if I remember correctly, and certainly in the comics when Superman did it, it was a major outlying of energy discharge that built up and built up and built up and got stronger and stronger and stronger and ended up like Cyclops' beam as opposed to the same tiny blue heat vision beams that she normally has. And it seemed to happen much more quickly than I remember it happening before. Usually there's a buildup, I thought, and it took a while to charge up to the point where it was a solar flare as opposed to just a strong blast of heat vision. And it happened in seconds in the episode, and then she was powerless. I get it. They were trying to get to the point, and that's what they were going for. But I thought the effect lacked a little bit in the intensity that the beam is supposed to be when it's the solar flare.
Yeah, I agree. I thought that could have been done better. And at the end of the episode, and which will lead into Medusa, is the fact that Hank Henshaw, with Supergirl's blood, made his way to the Fortress of Solitude and fooled the system there. I don't know why Kelex can't see that it's not Supergirl, but by using the blood and putting his hand onto the console, he's able to gain access to the database there and asks about Medusa, which is, as we know from the description for the episode, a virus that Cadmus wants to unleash to kill any aliens in the vicinity. And to help in that regard, Kara has to enlist the unexpected help of Lena Luthor. And at the end of this episode is the introduction of Barry and Cisco Ramon who arrive on that Earth to ask Kara to enlist her help to help them out on their Earth with this big alien invasion that will take place across The Flash, Arrow, and DC's Legends of Tomorrow 3 nights in a row throughout this week, 4 nights in a row, which by the time you hear this will have mostly aired once we release this podcast on Wednesday. What day will that be? Wednesday, the 30th of November. So we've got the Medusa on Monday night, the 28th, the Flash on the 29th, Arrow on the 30th, and then DC Legends of Tomorrow on December 1st. So this podcast is released right in the middle of all that, so we're not going to be able to discuss what happened in those episodes, but it's exciting. Medusa, straight into Invasion. All 3 episodes will be called Invasion across The Flash, Arrow, and DC Legends of Tomorrow. A huge, unprecedented event.
Yes, indeed. Now, how stupid is Kelex? You mentioned you're not sure how he can't see that it's... But not only that, he comes out and he says, desist in what you're doing or you will be disintegrated. He doesn't stop. Then he says, desist in what you're doing or you will be disintegrated. He still doesn't stop. So then I say, the whole time I'm going, okay, disintegrate him. And then the third time, desist in what you're doing or you will be disintegrated. He still doesn't do it. Then Hank Henshaw puts the blood in and assumes the identity of Kara in order to open the thing. And then Kelex shuts down and the red alert thing goes off and he says, oh, hi, Kara Zor-El, come on in. So aside from the fact that he can't see, maybe robots operate on sensors only. Okay. But then he also issues his warning 3 times, which I assume the warning is there so that the person will stop doing what he's doing before he gets to the point where he has fooled you. You, as the protective force of the fortress, allowed him to stand there so long, and he clearly wasn't ready to fool you yet, but you gave him the time to fool you by warning him 3 times and clearly showing the villain that you were never, ever going to do anything about what he was doing, and therefore your warning was worthless, and he got through anyway by, fooling you with the blood and making you think he was Kara Zor-El. I just thought it was hilarious. I get to see Kelex in the fortress, and it's cool, and he flies in there, and he's issuing warnings, and he's badass, and then I realize he's just inept.
Indeed.
So that kind of annoyed me a bit. But have we heard this name Medusa before?
No, not. And as I saw in a preview for that episode, Kara is unaware of it and hasn't heard of it before, and so it's a new terminology. Obviously, the word Medusa goes back to Greek mythology with the Gorgon who has the snake for hair and is able to turn men into stone by looking at them. But as far as in any Kryptonian sense, no, I've never heard of it before.
Okay, because I thought that the ending of the episode lacked a little bit of the heft I think they were going for. I felt like it was a little lackluster because he says it and then it closes on the Greg Berlanti logo and everything. But I thought that, when you heard it, you were supposed to go, oh, yeah, Medusa or whatever. But since no one had ever heard of it, who even knows it's related to this upcoming crossover? Who even knows what it has anything to do with? And anybody just watching who doesn't really know or care that there's a 4-night crossover is just going to go, okay, so what is that? And then, of course, you have to watch the next episode to find out. But I felt like it kind of was a bit of a deflation to the sales at that moment when that was the final thing they ended on.
Yeah, well, Medusa doesn't actually have any correlation with the upcoming Invasion crossover that I know of. It just happens to be this next episode for Supergirl, and it's just at the end of this episode, when I guess once the whole Medusa thing's tied up, that the Flash and Cisco will come in, and that will be the beginning of the crossover event. Medusa itself
they keep
doesn't
talking
have
about
anything.
4-night crossover, so we're really only going to get 2 minutes at the end of a regular episode of Supergirl, and the show's going to be wrapped up, and then she's going to get involved. But it doesn't really have anything to do with the Supergirl show.
No, well, it's they explained it as a three episode event. Invasion is the first this episode of Arrow, then the 100th episode of the first episode. This is Flash, then the 100th episode of Arrow, and then DC Legends of Tomorrow. They're all titled Invasion. But if you don't get to see that the end of this week's Supergirl episode has the Flash and Cisco coming to grab Supergirl and get her help, then you won't know that how they did that, because I'm guessing the beginning of the Flash will just have them coming over. They'll be bringing Supergirl with them, but they may not recap that they actually went to her Earth and grabbed her. I don't know. They might do that, but I guess it's to grab all the Supergirl fans, because once they're watching the Supergirl episode and they see at the end that she's now going to be involved over the next 3 nights with those 3 other shows, then you might not be watching. But they need to tack that on to the end of this week's Supergirl episode so that to watch the following 3 nights.
Well, I'm not sure how they're advertising it, or if you're talking about the media, or if you're just talking about TV commercials, but everything I've read and all these commercials I see while I'm watching Supergirl all say 4-night crossover event. So it's really kind of a false advertising in that it's not really, although I guess you could argue that the 2 minutes at the end of a non-connected episode of Supergirl start the crossover, so there's your 4th night. But
exactly.
The other thing I wanted to mention, and it only comes about every once in a while when something like this big event happens, and I probably said it with Man of Steel, or I've probably said it in other instances, I long for the days where we didn't have all this knowledge of what was coming. Like, you've already told me what the scene is, and the episode hasn't even aired yet. I don't love that we already know this is going to... Like, how cool would it be if you were just randomly watching the episode and you just thought it was a Medusa episode with Hank Henshaw and whatever happened, and then the add-on scene at the end that they do on these shows a lot, where they tease what might be coming later, not even in the very next episode sometimes, and you go, oh, wow. That's so cool. Has Flash and Cisco coming through, and maybe Arrow's there, or whatever it is, and you find out that now, this week, we're going to see Supergirl on Flash, because Flash and Cisco came. And then at the end of Flash, we find out, or during Flash, oh, wow, look, it's Arrow, he's there too. I just think it would be so much greater, and I don't know if there's nothing anybody can do about it, except maybe what Hollywood does sometimes, and has closed sets and has people sign agreements and make sure that plot points don't get out. And so we do know a lot more about movies than we used to, but there are still, I just think it would be great if we didn't know Darth Vader was in Rogue One. Same thing here. I just think it would be great if we didn't know that this was happening, and I guess there's just no way to go back to those times.
Yeah, it's sad. I agree with you. Being surprised is a massive thing that just doesn't happen anymore. Even with comic books, we get the solicitations, and we know what's coming out 2 months in advance or 3 months in advance. I long for those days when you're just sitting back and watching and go, "Oh my God, look at that! Oh yeah, how cool is that?" But it doesn't happen anymore.
Yeah,
sadly.
like there'd never be a time when, I don't know if you watched The Next Generation, but there'd never be a time now where when Picard is taken over by the Borg at the final episode of the season, we had no idea whether he was signed on to come back next year, or whether he was going to be saved, or whether he was going to be destroyed when the beam went off. It was, when I watched it, it was one of those things where I went, "Oh my God, is there a contract problem? Does he want to leave the show? Does he need to?" We know everything now. There's never going to be a time. It'll still be dramatic, but it won't be. We know
shocking
everything that's going to end before it ends. So there's never, that was in, of course, 90 or something. So that was a very, very long time ago.
Yeah.
It's just lost a lot of its ability to really shock and awe.
I agree. All right, and the fact that these shows are doing so well is fantastic news, because we heard this week that the DC shows for Warner Brothers, Time Warner, are generating $1 billion in revenue per year for the company. So the DC Comics TV shows are doing great dollars for Time Warner, and that is great for us as fans, because that means that if they're generating $1 billion in revenue per year for the company, then they're going to continue with those shows.
Yeah, that's a crazy amount of money, and I can't even imagine any shows ever being canceled if they're generating. You normally cancel a show when it loses viewers, when it's dropping in the ratings, when advertisers won't pay for. I don't know where this $1 billion comes from, but the ratings on none of these CW shows are particularly that impressive. I guess they are for CW, and somehow the company is making this kind of money. I mean, that amount of bank. If the $1 billion includes all 4 shows, and we only know that amount this year, or we only knew it last
Gotham.
year. I'm saying, so it includes Gotham too?
I guess it does. It just says all the DC Comics TV shows.
Okay, so then, I guess you would assume that it does. That means that once, and it'll probably go up with a 5th show. Who knows what shows they added or what shows are included, but if it's all 5, and they counted it from last year, because you have to have an end of the year to know that, right?
Right.
I mean, they can't be saying this year they will, or I guess they could make predictions, but a lot of people have been saying the Arrow ratings are dropping, Legends of Tomorrow might be canceled, so who knows what shows are making it. If we see, Legends is moving nights because they're saying the ratings have gotten so bad, and gone down so drastically that it needs help. So they're putting it on with Flash. It's going to be on after Flash starting in January, when another show, No Tomorrow, I guess, is getting canceled for bad ratings. So if that doesn't survive, then we will know that not all of the shows are producing the way they want them to. But overall, DC television, whatever shows are included in that and whatever shows are successful in that, is producing $1 billion a year, which is more than both Batman v Superman and Man of Steel in the combined amount of time since those 2 movies have been out. In those amount of years, it would be $5 billion versus less than $2 billion.
That's huge. That's obviously TV is where things are headed for these companies when they're talking about using those properties.
Yeah, I mean, it's incredible. And I love watching them. I'm glad they're on. I look forward to them. I do have a lot of issues with the way they present television, but clearly it's working for them. And I guess they're not looking really to change it when it's that successful.
Indeed. Now, the only other TV news we have, or TV-related news, before we move into the comic books, is the announcement that Tom Welling, who, as you know, played Clark Kent on Smallville for 10 seasons, has designed his own Smallville-inspired T-shirt to raise funds for sick children in the St. Jude's Children's Hospital. And that's great news. That's fantastic on his behalf to do that. And the proceeds go, as I said, to the Children's Hospital. They're $22.99 each. The drama that I have with it is that he's decided to use the slogan, "No tights, no flights," or no flights, no tights, to promote the shirts, and that's what's on the shirt. That's the design of him with his glasses on, looking upwards, pushing his glasses up onto his nose. I wouldn't necessarily be basking in the glory of no flights, no tights, when to a lot of fans of Smallville, that was the one detrimental thing that they didn't like about the series. It seems a bit of a, I don't know, kind of in-your-face slogan.
Well, it's interesting. I've read a couple of write-ups on this, and the idea that he's sending a huge FU or a diss or a middle finger to fans or whatever. And I hear what you're saying, but the strange thing is, and you know how I feel about Smallville, but the strange thing is that I had no reaction to this whatsoever. I just thought it was a guy who was involved with Smallville, who was celebrating the fact that he was on the longest-run superhero television show that's ever been on, and that he also has a connection to this no tights, no flights rule, but he also played Clark Kent, and it has an image of a guy with glasses looking up toward the sky. And I don't know why no tights, no flights, no tights has anything to do with sick children, but I think he maybe knew that he could tap into an area of fandom that might buy the shirts and therefore earn more money for the charity. But then based on what you're saying and what I've heard other people say, it might turn people off to buying the shirts, so then it is a bad idea. But it's, in terms of it hurting my feelings personally, I just didn't have that effect, and I didn't really get it when I heard people write it. Sometimes I just think ads are clickbait, or people write things just to get people incensed. But you are saying the same thing that those write-ups said, so apparently there is some feeling in the fandom that is what's going on here. But I don't know that I have a negative reaction to it.
No, fair enough, and I don't think necessarily that a lot of people have to have, and maybe that's the only slogan you could use to get away with that didn't have to include copyright. You couldn't put Smallville or Up and Away or something like that. That may be a catchphrase that is copyrighted, and so an image of himself pushing up glasses onto his own face with a slogan like "No flights, no tights" is maybe something that is related to Smallville without being a copyrighted thing that he can get away with and still put all the funds towards the children's hospital. Maybe it's as simple as that. It just seemed a strange choice in my view, because as I say, I see that as a negative connotation about Smallville, not necessarily something positive to embrace. But that's just me.
Well, I mean, listen, I had a lot of issues with Smallville, but I also liked a lot of it. I don't think that the truth is, and yes, maybe it went on to a few years too long without flying. But the truth of the matter is the show was not meant to be about Superman. And I know people get angry when they say that, and when they said it for the last few years. And we get it. It's 10 years now. It's a little long. But that is the truth. As much as a cliche as that has become as an excuse as to why he's not using his powers or whatever, it really wasn't ever meant to be about the character of Superman. It was always meant to be about the guy who Superman was before he became Superman.
Yeah.
So the problem you run into when you have success and when the show stays on, and again, the ratings for Smallville most of the years were lower than any of the ratings for any of the shows now, and the shows now have low ratings from what I remember of ratings television being. But it somehow lasted for 10 years. It somehow still holds the title as longest-running superhero show. It was considered very successful. I guess the network had even less viewership at that time, so that amount of viewers wasn't as bad as it might seem like now. Same reason why the shows now are considered successful ratings, even though they only get about 3 million or whatever, because they have much less households than a lot of the other networks. But the idea that there was no flights and no tights, and then the idea that we heard that rule came from Tom, whether it's true or not, and as much as I want to blame him, or as much as everybody wants to blame him, or as much as everybody wants to say it came from him, Tom Welling was a nobody. If he came on the set after he was cast and said, listen, I'll do this, but if you want me, and he threw back his hair, you're going to have no tights and no flights. So that rule sticks or I'm walking, they'd say, okay, walk. But the point is they didn't want flights. They didn't want tights. So it may have come up years and years later where once he was already Clark and they couldn't recast, he might have said, no. This show's supposed to be about Clark Kent becoming Superman. Once he becomes Superman, the show is over. So there can't be any tights and there can't be any. Who knows how it went down behind the scenes. But from a standpoint of what the show was meant to be, it totally makes sense that somebody might argue that we shouldn't have tights and we shouldn't have flights. There are movies for that. There are shows about Superman for that. This isn't about Superman. This is about young Clark Kent becoming Superman. And believe me, I've made it clear that I believe the show failed in many, many ways of showing us how he became Superman and who Superman was and who the type of character Clark was. I think they dropped the ball almost every chance they got. But the show was meant to be about Clark. So the fact that he never donned the tights and there never were any flights, except that there were, doesn't really hurt that vision, which is what the show was supposed to be in the first place. And so I get that you're saying it's a negative connotation, but on the other hand, the show lasted 10 years. People watched it. It was considered a huge success. And people still now talk about it should be Tom Welling instead of Henry Cavill. It should have been Tom Welling instead of Brandon Routh. Tom Welling. People are still talking about it. And, whatever McDonald's he's working at now, he's still laughing about the fact that people still think he should be cast as Superman, even though he didn't seem to want to play the character to its full extent. And listen, nobody blames Michael Rosenbaum, but in my opinion, the year he left the show leading up to it was one of the worst seasons for Lex Luthor. It was one of the worst times Michael Rosenbaum was on the show. It was weaker, I thought. Once they decided to make that decision and he was the bad guy and he was pushing people out of windows, and he himself said, once that happened, I knew my time on the show was done, because the point of this show was, just like it was showing Clark becoming Superman, it was showing Lex become the villain. And once Lex became the villain, for me, from a Michael Rosenbaum's voice, he said, that was it for me. The show was done. The exciting part of it, the meaningfulness of that character was in seeing him become who he would become. Once he became that, there was nowhere else for it to go, and that's when he decided to leave the show. And at that point, he and Tom Welling and the other actors on the show did have some power, and there was nothing they could say or do to convince him to stick around, even though I'm sure they would have wanted him to as a major player on the show that would then be a strong villain for Clark.
Yep.
But he decided to leave because the character became. So that, again, goes to Tom Welling wanting to stay Clark as long as possible, because the show's over once you put on the tights. That's the show.
Yeah.
So I get that you're saying it's a negative connotation, but on the other hand, there are other places for Superman flying around in all his regalia, and Smallville was never meant to be that. I get it that around season 6, people wished that he would have been wearing the big red S and flying around and saving people and living in Metropolis and being Clark full time, but that isn't what it was. So, I don't see it. I get that people do, and I understand, and I would have liked to see him fly, but I think that was the point.
Agreed. Okay, well, let's move on. We've got more we need to get to, and we'll go into comic books now, where we've got two issues of Action Comics that need to be looked at. They were Action Comics 966 and Action Comics 967. I'm just trying to look through all the different things that happened in this particular issue. What's your memories of these two? I'm trying to remind myself what happened in Action Comics 966.
Well, as you're trying to remind yourself, I'll go into another one of my tirades that I think is what makes people not like me. The thing is, I try to be honest, and I think I either hurt people's feelings or I turn people off by being honest. And what I mean by that is I feel like people love this new launch of Superman and this new launch of Lois and everybody else because they've been fooled. And what I mean by that is the producers and the publishers and the editors and the writers and everybody who came together and decided to do this said, listen, they really want to see, quote unquote, their Superman. So let's just tell them their Superman's been in the ether somewhere for a while, and he's still out there, and we're going to bring him and introduce him, and they'll be happy no matter what we do. And so people were. And maybe the stories are good, and maybe people really are authentically loving what's going on. I feel like it's more a matter of, we're just glad you got rid of what we didn't like, and most people were closed off to that to begin with. And I think I've said a lot of this already. So once they erased that continuity, even though they haven't fully erased it yet, people were just happy to have something back that the writers then told them was something that they had before. When in fact it's all a made-up construct, and there is no person who was before. There was just a written Superman before and a written Superman now, and now they're saying that the written Superman that's going on right now is one that was written before that has somehow come back through time and is here with us now. And for me, I'm remiss in my duties at the Superman homepage because I have not read these books. I did not read last month. I'm not enjoying it. I don't like what they've done. I don't feel this is Superman. I don't feel this is Superman for Batman and Wonder Woman. I don't feel like he would be accepted as a member of the Justice League. I feel like it's a huge misstep, not because they needed to keep New 52, but it would have been better to just say, we're wiping everything clean and we're going back to where we were before, instead of trying to fool us into thinking that this was something we had missed or that he was still out there in the ether. Just say, you know what? We screwed up. Nobody liked New 52. It sucked. It was terrible. Superman wasn't Superman, or at least many fans didn't think he was. So now we're just going to have Superman again. Here he is. Congratulations. He's back. Forget the New 52. It blew. Now let's move on. But instead of doing that, they've tried to write it into continuity that all this stuff still happened and the real Superman was killed and no one cares, and Lois was killed and no one cares, and now there's these other characters that are still the same characters, but they were just kind of lost in a dark hole that no one could find, and now they're back, and then that makes everybody happy. And it just doesn't make me happy, and and that's okay. I don't have to be happy, and everybody can disagree with me, and that's fine. But I just don't understand how it's not being seen for what it is, and it's a ruse to reset what they had made a mistake of by launching the New 52 anyway. And if it was going to be that, why not just say, you know what, 52 was a failed experiment, we're just going to cancel it, and we're going to continue from where we left off.
Because, you know why? Because it's not just Superman that we're looking at here. There were things that worked in the New 52 for other characters that they maybe wanted to hold on to. So the things that weren't working for Superman were able to be written out or changed over or whatever. And I understand what you're saying in regards to... But people do care about the death of Superman. People do care about what's happening with Lois. It's currently what's happening in the comic books at the moment. In Superman, in Action Comics 966, it's all about Lana Lang as the new Superwoman coming to this Lois Lane and this Clark Kent and saying, hey, you can't take over her life. You can't just think that you can step in and do all that. And Lois saying, look, I don't want to, but that Lois reached out to me and I've been getting messages to say that I need to look into this and that I need to try to find out what happened to her and all that kind of stuff. So I think what people are enjoying is, yes, they think there is that aspect of people saying, yes, I'm getting back the Superman that I enjoyed, but the writing is really good, the stories are really good, the artwork is really good, and I think that's what people are enjoying. Like people like Michael Bailey, who, yes, was a post-crisis fan and was big into the John Byrne era, and that's his Superman. He's not all about, oh, I've got my Superman back. He's all about, wow, these stories are really well written. I'm really enjoying where they're taking these characters. I don't understand what's happening. There's a lot of mystery in there involved, but they're not just doing it for the sake of doing it. There is some really good threads here. There are really good stories here that are tying into each other. It all seems to be, working out nicely as far as they keep jumping from mystery to mystery, and they're giving us little bits here and there, and we're growing. These characters are growing rather than just being on the page. They're actually developing, and I think that's what a lot of fans are latching onto, is that the story writing with guys like Dan Jurgens and Peter Tomasi, they're telling really good stories. It doesn't matter what Superman it is. The fact that it feels like Superman and the stories that are being told feel like Superman is what people are latching onto.
Well, I hope that that's it. I mean, I haven't found that, and I don't have a loyalty to people who happened to write a version of the character I liked years and years ago. I like John Byrne as well as in terms of the story that was told at that time. I couldn't care less if it was written by you or written by some guy out on the street who's homeless now, or if it was written by John Byrne. If the story came out the way it was, and that's the way Superman went on for 10 or 15 years before the next reboot, which has happened since the beginning of the character and will happen again. If that's the one that we all liked, the Lex Luthor businessman, the mogul, that kind of thing that everybody's comparing Trump to now, that's what I liked. It didn't matter to me that John Byrne wrote it, because I'm sure that John Byrne has written some stinkers in his time. And I know that other writers that have written great things have written bad things. So if the stories are great, and if everybody's loving the stories, then I think that's great. I didn't feel that. I felt more like I was meant to love the star power of the artist that used to be, and the idea that this was my Superman. And I didn't feel like I connected to the stories the way you're saying that a lot of people do. And obviously that's what the company wants, not because they care, but because they want to make money. And the way to make money is to have people feel connected to these characters and these stories. So whatever you have to do, whether it's bring back the old writers, bring back a character that was missing, whatever it is you have to do, write good stories is probably on top of the list.
Yeah.
I just, for me, I'm not enjoying it. I don't like the Super Son thing. I made that clear from the beginning. I don't think Superman acts like a good father. I don't think that Lana and Lois even had a relationship, so her suddenly saying you can't just replace her or take over her life seems out of place to me. But it's possible that for the same reasons I said people were closed off to the New 52, I'm somewhat closed off here, although I have read up to this point. I just haven't been reading, and I'm not I feel bad because I'm not jumping up and down to go out and read them like most people are. You mentioned Michael Bailey. I'm so glad I have these Superman comics to read. They're so good now. And I don't remember he didn't hate the New 52. I don't think he was a hater that just hated it. I think he likes good stories. So if the stories are good, that's what he's liking. And for me, it wasn't doing it for a lot of the things that they were doing and trying to give us weren't connecting for me. And I'm sure there are other people who don't have it connecting for them, but I feel like I'm missing something because I do hear a lot of fans really enjoying it, and it sounds like you yourself are among them.
Yeah, I am, and it's a great time for me to be able to read and enjoy and look forward to reading them and putting those titles to the top of my list. So let's obviously it's not something that we can discuss at length. So let's move away into something that we can discuss. And that is the 2016 Shield Awards, which are the awards that are out there for fans to be able to voice their opinions on the comic books that have a 2016 cover date on them, as well as the TV shows, movies that have been released in 2016, the merchandise that's come out this year, all related to Superman. The Shield Awards are ongoing, happening right now. You'll see the big banner at the top of the Superman homepage website that'll allow you to go to the voting page so that you can vote on the 15 categories there that go across a range of topics, as I've discussed, that allow you to state your opinion. And we'll be closing those off in early December. So you've got a little limited time to be able to get your vote in for the 2016 Shield Awards. And by voting, you get a chance to go into the draw to win a copy of the Blu-ray edition of Batman v Superman, the Ultimate Cut, and the DVD of the complete first season of Supergirl. So get involved in the 2016 Shield Awards.
All right. Something that I guess you put a lot of time in every year, just like everything he does on the site, guys. It's really, there's a lot of categories. There's a lot of things you can vote on. So definitely, especially if you're enjoying the books, there's a lot of stuff up there that will be right down your alley.
Let's move into the big question segment of the show.
Let's start with the big question.
Last month's big question was, what did you think of Tyler Hoechlin as Superman? Guthrie McLean wrote, I love Tyler's performance. I hope to see more of him soon. It would be great to see him guest star on The Flash. That would be huge. Tyler's Superman had charm, confidence, kindness, and he smiled. He also had enough lines. He was everything I wanted him to be. I hope we can see Cavill's Superman develop the same way. In contrast, Cavill may have the perfect physique for Superman, but Tyler had way more lines in 2 episodes, and his performance was at least delightful. The DCEU needs improvement.
Fair enough. Thanks, Guthrie. Appreciate your opinion on that. Brandon Whitmore, he also wrote in. He says, I agree with the majority that Tyler nailed the personality of the character that most of us wanted to see. Very impressed with him. Having said that, the writing of how he was handled was off at times. I didn't like that he didn't check on the safety of those on board the crashed ship in his intro before flying off, and hated that he smiled and made a quip at Metello number 2 when he was near death after having his synthetic heart ripped out. Very out of character for Superman. So maybe not so light from Brandon.
Well, I would have to say that I don't know that he was near death. I didn't get that impression. It's been a while since I watched it, but I don't remember exactly how it went down. But a quip after you've defeated a foe is okay with me. I don't think he was being flippant with someone who was about to die. I did have a discussion with someone who talked about Superman would never beat down on a helpless opponent or whatever, and this was Metallo, who has a kryptonite heart, who could kill him in any second and is superpowered. So not that that's what you're saying here, but I don't think it was too, for me, out of character, because I didn't read the scene that way. I didn't get the impression that he was killing someone and making a joke about it. But maybe I'm wrong.
Who do we have next?
Henry Bernstein wrote, I absolutely loved it. I thought he was perfect as both Clark and Supes. He seemed kind, good, smart, and heroic. I loved his one-sided conversation with Lois on the phone, and I especially liked how he played his attitude towards Martian Manhunter. That is the way superheroes disagree. They don't need to start punching each other. I would be so happy if CW added a new Superman show with Hoagland to their already awesome lineup. Is it Hecklin?
It's Hecklin.
Hecklin. Okay, very good. The problem
Henry.
with a Superman show on the CW, and I've thought about this, and everybody would like it, is that what would make it stand apart from Supergirl? You know, they're already using all of his enemies.
Yeah.
I don't see how they could do a show.
No, unless Supergirl concluded and they decided to do a Superman show afterwards.
Oh, that's possible.
Okay, Patrick O'Neill writes in. He says, I thought Tyler did a good job as Superman. His portrayal was similar to Christopher Reeve, just not as bumbling, which is good. I loved the Chris Reeve Superman movies, and he was phenomenal in the role, but I always felt that his Clark was a little too over-the-top, bumbling around. I'm fine with Tyler going more closely to the Christopher Reeve route. I just don't think Superman in the show should get too over-the-top or campy. Overall, he did well, and I hope we get to see him again. Thank you, Patrick. I think I have to agree with that.
Yeah, I think I agree with Patrick as well. Nice summation there. Our new big question is, what did you like best about the 4-night Invasion TV crossover event between Supergirl, The Flash, Arrow, and DC's Legends of Tomorrow?
Yeah, by the time you've listened to this podcast, you'll have most likely seen all 4 episodes. So let us know what you think of the Invasion crossover event, and we'll happily read out your responses here on our next podcast. You can do that by clicking on the big question button found at the Radio KAL webpage, at the Superman homepage, and we'll read them out here next month.
I'm laughing at you, you hear? Laughing!
All right, it's time now for the Superman comedy sketch. What do you got, Steve?
Well, we've got an old one here from one of the episodes of Seinfeld that was titled The Stock Tip. And it's a little bit with Jerry and George having a discussion about Superman. And here it is. Take a listen.
Well, I think Superman probably has a very good sense of humor.
I never heard him say anything really funny.
But it's common sense. He's got super strength, super speed. I'm sure he's got super humor.
I think that, but either you're born with a sense of humor or you're not. It's not going to change. Even if you go from the red sun of Krypton all the way to the yellow sun of the Earth.
Why? Why would that one area of his mind not be affected by the yellow sun of the Earth?
I don't know, but he ain't funny.
There you have it. That was our comedy sketch. And remember, if you do have something you'd like us to play here, a comedy sketch about Superman or superheroes, then feel free to let us know.
I always loved those bits on Seinfeld. It was like the only superhero TV we could get at that time. But if you talk about Superman for 30 seconds, you know, I like that. Let's get to our super secret soundbite.
Only one thing alive with less than 4 legs can hear this frequency, Superman, and that's you.
Now, last month's sound came from the pilot episode of Lois and Clark, The New Adventures of Superman. Let's hear it again.
Jimmy, never underestimate the need for a good obituary.
Well, that was the sound. Who got it right, Scotty?
Well, 9 people guessed it correctly. They were Patty, Tom Kubicki, David Huang, Fred Walsh, Rick Ruiz, Lynn S., M., David Barantz, Maury Hilder, and Patrick O'Neill.
Congratulations to those 9 people. Let's see if those 9 people and more people can guess where in the world of Superman this new sound comes from.
Clark, don't do it. You put that ring on, you're not yourself.
Well, if you think you know where in the world of Superman that new super secret soundbite comes from, then send your answer in. You'll find the super secret soundbite entry form under the favourites menu, under the radio KAL button, and we'll be happy to read out the names of the people who guess it right next month.
All right, and now it's time for the Superman song of the month, and it's Hal Ketchum's Hang In There, Superman, from his album, 1996 album, Hits. The song was a tribute to Christopher Reeve.
Here it is, Hang In There, Superman by Hal Ketchum.
Heard you were in trouble. I heard an awful bad. Facing the biggest challenges that you have ever had. For peace and truth and justice, we've struggled every day. Speeding to our rescue, faster than a train. Oh, you were my hero when I was just a kid. I used to dream of doing every single thing that you did. Jumping off of buildings, flying like a bird. While potentates and presidents are hung on every word. May I speak for everybody when I say, hang in there, Superman. You always came out fighting at the bell. Hang in there, Superman. 1 billion grown-up children wish you well. Metropolis is calling. London needs your help. Paris, France, and Budapest can't do it for themselves. Give the imposition. Now I know you've got it rough. But this old world still needs your voice, so hang on in there tough. May I speak for everybody when I say, hang in there, Superman. You always came out fighting at the bell. Hang in there, Superman. 1 billion grown-up children wish you well.
Well, that was the song, and that is our show. Now, remember, if you do have a suggestion for us, something that you think we need to be discussing here on the podcast, maybe there's a song you'd like to request, as I said, a comedy sketch that you can contribute to the show, or maybe there's a big question you'd like us to ask of the fans, all those suggestions can be sent to us using the KAL feedback form found at the Radio KAL website or webpage, or you can send us an email. My email is steve@supermanhomepage.com. You can email Scotty. His email address is scotty@supermanhomepage.com, and we'll endeavour to use those suggestions in a future show. But for now, thank you, Scotty.
Thank you, Steve. And remember, everyone, even if you're not enjoying the current incarnation of comic books, always look up in the sky.
You've been listening to Radio KAL, brought to you by supermanhomepage.com and our proud sponsor, Patrick O'Neill.